The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult, if not impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Thursday, March the 26th, 2026. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost. And opening with the front page, target of Ecuador. A U.S. attack is disputed. Farmers, not traffickers, were bombed, according to locals. Eduardo Cuevas and Boris Cuva of USA Today write jointly, a joint American and Ecuadorian military operation bombed farms and homes in an Amazon village in Ecuador, according to residents and their lawyers. Ecuador's defense ministry on March 6th said Operation Total Extermination included aerial bombardment in the province of Sucumbíos, which sits in the country's northeastern corner on the border with Colombia. Ecuadorian officials said the operation, conducted with U.S. intelligence, destroyed a hideout for a Colombian drug trafficking group. Residents of San Martin, the farming village of about 27 families in Sucumbíos, told USA Today that the operation, which took place March 1st through 6th, did not target drug traffickers. Instead, they said military personnel destroyed farms. They detained local workers, and they have told the United Nations Human Rights Group that Ecuadorian soldiers tortured them. The government's version is that they bombed encampments of certain armed groups. Vicente Garrido, vice president of the community of San Martin, who has lived there for nearly 40 years, said in an interview, "But what we're showing the world is that these are not encampments. These are peasants' homes." American military personnel said the operation showed the success of the partnership with Ecuador, whose conservative government has emerged as a key ally of the Trump administration in Latin America. Now, Kingsley Wilson, a spokesperson for the United States Department of War, formerly known as the Department of Defense, said operations were done jointly with Ecuadorian forces and in coordination with Ecuador's government. Wilson declined to respond directly to questions about specific tactics or targeting details and referred questions about Ecuadorian military actions to the country's government. All U.S. military actions are conducted through rigorous, multi-layered targeting processes, and each target is validated through established procedures, Wilson said in a statement. Cartel networks threaten the stability of our hemisphere, and the Department of War will continue working with committed partners to take decisive action against those who endanger our shared neighborhood. The Ecuadorian Defense and Interior Ministries did not respond to USA Today's emailed questions for comment. In early March, President Daniel Noboa, conservative strongman, announced a new phase against narco-terrorism and illegal mining by conducting joint operations with regional allies. That includes the U.S. In a March 17 X post, Noboa reaffirmed the commitment to take on organized crime. Today, together with international cooperation, we continue in that fight, bombing the places that serve as hideouts for these groups, largely Colombian ones that their own government allowed to infiltrate our country due to neglect its borders. Human rights have worried about militarized approaches to fighting suspected drug traffickers and the toll on civilians. Under the government's banner of fighting crime and drug trafficking, human rights are being violated, according to Maria Espinosa, defense lawyer with the Alliance of Organizations for Human Rights, and that's based in Ecuador. Security cannot be built on serious human rights violations. The government has obligations and standards it must abide by. In San Martin, Espinosa said no residents died in the operations, but residents worry what's next amid heightened military presence. The White House has taken on an aggressive approach to organized crime in Latin America. Since September, the United States has launched lethal strikes on suspected drug smuggling boats, killing more than 150 people in the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. Officials have provided scant evidence that those killed were drug traffickers, and some legal experts have said the killings violate U.S. and international law. The administration now appears poised to take fights to the land. Amid operations in San Martin, the United States hosted ideologically aligned leaders in Florida to encourage a militarized approach. Tactics to combat drug trafficking required military leaders exercising might, not lawyers telling generals what to do. That's according to Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff. You're dealing with a lot of lawyers in your own country, I'm sure, Miller said at the America's Counter Cartel Conference, March 5. You have my permission not to listen to them. The Department of State referred questions to the Pentagon. Militarized operations have been an established U.S. tactic in its decades-long war on drugs. They've had little success stopping the flow of drugs without also addressing corruption, impunity, and criminal groups' finances in countries, experts said. You multiply that among all of those countries, and you're going to have a pretty dire situation if it's taken to its logical conclusion. This from Orlando Perez, political science professor at University of North Texas, Dallas, and an expert on Latin American security. The reaction is not going to be very positive for U.S.-Latin American relations. Now, since 2024, Noboa has declared an internal armed conflict in Ecuador in response to rising crime. The country has seen the rise of powerful criminal organizations in its borders, along with international drug cartels from Mexico, Italy, and Albania, which also operate in Ecuador. Noboa has kept renewing a state of emergency, but it does not appear to have caused crime to drop. Homicides have only increased, reaching a new high in 2025. Meanwhile, cocaine shipments, which now mostly pass through Ecuador, have reached record levels globally. The government response hasn't contained violence in the country, according to Martina Rapido Ragazzino, North Andes researcher at Human Rights Watch, but rather it has only multiplied abuses. Now, Human Rights Watch has issued warnings of forced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and excessive use of force by Ecuador's military. On March 9, 8 United Nations experts sent a report to Ecuador's government warning of human rights abuses in its approach to fighting crime. Along Ecuador's border region, Espinosa said, communities face stigma for perceptions around criminal trafficking groups. Now, she said, communities like San Martin are living with the consequences. Miguel, the farmer, is trying to continue work, though he says workers are scared to return. He is too, pointing to constant noise of military helicopters and planes daily, but he said he sacrificed too much for the land. March 27 and 28, San Martin planned to host a festival for life and peace, according to a flyer on WhatsApp. The flyer said the hope was kites would fly in the sky, not war helicopters.
Returning to our front page, TSA workers are drowning in debt and stress, the union says. from Trevor Hughes of USA Today. Day after day, flight after flight, Cancun, Orlando, Honolulu, happy families and college students heading off on spring break vacations are being helped every day by 61,000 unpaid TSA workers. The screeners reminding travelers to remove liquids from their carry-ons, unpaid. Those scanning suitcases for guns and knives, unpaid. Those comparing IDs to prevent terrorists from boarding, unpaid. We're basically invisible, and we can't let you see that our guard is down, said Angela Grana, the Colorado-based regional vice president of the union representing TSA workers at 38 airports across the Rockies. But we are desperate. The anxiety is exhausting. Across the country, the partial government shutdown means TSA workers are going unpaid. For travelers, it has meant longer lines at busy airports as some TSA workers call in sick or quit. Some travelers have seen delays of more than 4 hours. Others have reported missing flights because short-handed screening has taken so long. President Trump on March 23rd deployed an undetermined number of ICE officers to several major airports in an effort to assist the security. For the TSA employees themselves, the pressure has been ratcheting up for weeks, months if you count the shutdown before this one. Some airports, including Denver International, have set up stations where travelers can donate grocery and gas gift cards, and the World Central Kitchen has set up distribution sites in the greater Baltimore, Washington, and Houston areas to provide free meals. Grana said it's a tough thing for the men and women of the Transportation Security Administration to swallow their pride and accept help from the traveling public. But many agents are still digging out from the partial paychecks they got in February during the last shutdown. She said some workers have been living off maxed out credit cards or have borrowed money from friends and family. We're drowning in debt, and now you ask us to do it again. This is so un-American. We are living paycheck to paycheck already as some of the worst paid federal employees. We're nobodies with the biggest responsibility. Grana said some employees had been sleeping in their cars at airports because they can't afford the gas to commute, but increasingly they're just sleeping inside terminals to keep cool. She said it's insulting to TSA workers to watch ICE officers who are getting paid and paid better deployed at airports without actually contributing. Another union representative said things have gone beyond desperate for some TSA employees. They're beginning to literally starve because they do not have the financial means to provide food for their families. This according to Mac Johnson, the American Federation of Government Employees' second vice president for Council 100. He said this at an online news conference March the 24th to urge congressional compromise. Union President Everett Kelly said at the news conference that right now these workers need a vote, a signature, and a paycheck. In the TSA, which was created after 9/11, screeners took over work that had been largely performed by private contractors. Today, they are part of the Department of Homeland Security, which also conducts immigration enforcement, leads disaster response via FEMA, and oversees the Coast Guard. Grana said many TSA agents served in the military, and they take to heart their mission to protect the public. The agency is supposed to be funded by fees travelers pay, but Congress has halted funding for the agency during a partisan fight, in part over whether ICE agents should be barred from wearing masks when conducting immigration enforcement. But few of the ICE officers sent to airports are wearing masks. Trump fired Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, in early March, and replacement Markwayne Mullin was sworn in March 24th. My first priority is to end the partisan fighting and reopen the U.S. Department of Homeland Security as a matter of national security, Mullin said after taking office. At Denver International Airport, arriving passenger Tricia Hernandez, 27, said she had been pleasantly surprised at how smooth her security experience was flying out of California. A part-time server and college student, she expressed solidarity with TSA workers. I was shocked at the camaraderie and community, Hernandez said. They are doing God's work. Hernandez said she hopes the government shutdown gets resolved soon and workers start getting paid again. And she marveled at how cheerful TSA screeners were. I would probably not have such a good attitude.
Generation Z and the demise of the house party. Many have missed out and now long for the rite of passage that others had. Charles Trapani of USA Today writes this article. We used to be a proper country. We're dancing on sticky living room floors, sneaking beers from our parents' refrigerators, and bumping music on stereos were hallmarks of adolescence. Gen Z apparently doesn't know that, or at least not to the same degree millennials and Gen Xers do. On social media, some members of Generation Z, that's the cohort born between 1997 and 2012, have confessed they never went to a large house party as a teenager, to the shock and horror of older Gen Zers, millennials, and Gen Xers, who remember them fondly. In one Reddit post, a Gen Zer innocently dared to ask if the ragers depicted in teen movies from the 80s through the early 2000s were ever actually real. According to thousands of millennials and Gen Xers in the replies, yes, sweet summer child, they certainly were. Sociology experts say it's true that Gen Z overall has not had the same party experiences as prior generations, and there are several reasons for that. Starters, the COVID-19 pandemic drastically impacted the way people socialize, and its ramifications are felt to this day. Plus, in the area of smartphones and social media, any embarrassing moment can now live in infamy online. So Gen Z grew up far more cautious about letting loose and making mistakes in public. Gen Z is still having house parties, their version of them, but it's very different than the freedom and the living in the moment that is really depicted in movies like House Party or 10 Things I Hate About You, or any of those sorts of really key 80s, 90s, and 2000s types of movies, where those parties both sort of showed freedom and collision of different social groups, and a real quest for self-discovery and identity, according to Jason Dorsey, president of the Center for Generational Kinetics. Now, Gen Z is under the microscope everywhere. Large house parties certainly had their pitfalls and dangers, but to many, they were also a pivotal feature of adolescence and coming of age. Those parties don't seem to be happening anymore, at least not in the same way. Dorsey says Gen Z in general grew up with parties with tighter invite lists and parents present. This partly might be attributable to the COVID pandemic, which shuttered large gatherings and led to strict rules and guidelines as they returned. Gen Z, at least at the older end, missed a lot of milestones as a result of COVID. Graduations, normal college experience, and so on, according to Pamela Aronson, sociology professor at the University of Michigan. They're also entering adulthood during a time of significant economic insecurity. I'm not sure that the entire generation is nostalgic for house parties, but they did miss a lot of milestones. As for when house parties peaked, well, it depends on who you ask. In some viral videos, older Gen Zers reminisce about the parties of 2016 up through 2019. In an X-post with 2.8 million views, a user proposes that the peak of American house parties was probably somewhere between 2007 and 2011. In response to that, another user says the 90s word-of-mouth parties were something else. You don't know who was there, who you'd run into. It was just an address and a rumor. As a whole, Gen Z drinks less alcohol than previous generations. They're also having less sex than previous generations. They aren't dating or having romantic relations as much either. They also feel lonelier. Could the end of house parties be contributing to these trends? There is a hot debate right now around the pros and cons of Gen Z not having or delaying having some of these traditional coming-of-age experiences, according to Dorsey. House parties would definitely be on that list as a real opportunity for freedom and all kinds of different life experiences you can imagine, from drinking to a first kiss. Now, we're starting to see if it plays out among college-age students who get to college and don't have the experience to know how to become self-reliant in a lot of these situations. Perhaps Gen Z's nostalgia for ragers points to deeper longings for opportunities to meet people, friends, and romantic interests alike, in person rather than online, for the chance to do something risky without it haunting them online forever. For Gen Zers who feel they missed out on house parties, remember, hindsight is 20/20. Plenty of problems came with those parties too. Your nostalgia likely has more to do with what those parties represent than the actual parties themselves. Nostalgia is just that. Nostalgia, Aronson says. It does not reflect the reality of the previous time period, but rather our images of that time period. Don't forget, there are plenty of ways to foster self-discovery and freedom in your own life without going to a big house party. The generation still wants to have self-expression, Dorsey says. They want to find a community where they feel safe and included. They want to have meaningful relationships, a thrill of having fun. These are very human beings, very human things that are just taking place either later or differently within this generation. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:20.
Probe reveals price tag for DHS ad. Taxpayers are on the hook for Noam's production. From Terry Collins of USA Today. U.S. taxpayer dollars covered more than $286,000 on production costs for an anti-immigration ad featuring then Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, according to expenses revealed by two lawmakers. Also, the Strategy Group, a Trump-allied subcontractor that created the $220 million commercial, spent more than $107,000 on labor costs, received a $60,000 signing bonus to produce the ad, and another $20,000 on horse rentals. Democratic Senators Peter Welch of Vermont and Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut disclosed on March 23rd as part of their investigation into the no-bid contract ad campaign. In the spot filmed in October of last year, Noem appears on horseback at Mount Rushmore, pleading with undocumented immigrants to leave the U.S. The senators said the subcontractor spent more than $52,000 on videography, photography, and production vendors, and nearly $4,000 on hair and makeup. This looks like waste, fraud, and abuse to me, Welch said in a statement the senators released as they provided initial financial breakdowns of Noem's ad. While leading the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem and her senior team allowed tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to be spent on wasteful production costs, a shady signing bonus, and a very expensive horse rental. And that's just what we know so far. President Trump removed Noem from her Homeland Security post on March the 5th in the wake of the controversial ad, which she said in a combative Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on March 3rd, Trump had authorized. Trump later said he didn't know about the ad campaign. Republican Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen was sworn in March 24th as Homeland Security head. Trump named Noem as the special envoy for the Shield of Americas, an agency focused on fighting organized crime, drug cartels, and trafficking networks. Now, what started the Noem commercial controversy? DHS awarded a Delaware-based Safe America Media a $143 million contract for Noem's ad, which was then subcontracted to the Strategy Group for production, according to Reuters. The Strategy Group had previous ties with Noem and involved in her 2022 South Dakota gubernatorial race, and the company's CEO, Ben Yoho, is married to former DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin, who has fired back on social media that the company has been dragged through the mud. In a statement to USA Today on March 24th, DHS did not address the specific expenses, but noted the department cannot and does not determine, control, or weigh in on who contractors hire or use to fulfill the terms of the contract. The strategy group wrote a March 12th letter it sent to the senators and posted on X, saying that the company received $226,137 total for 5 film shoots, 45 produced video advertisements, and 6 produced radio advertisements as a subcontractor for Safe America. I have a feeling that you can agree that we were very fair with what we charged Safe America, considering the amount of product we supplied them, the company wrote. Yoho Strategy Group CEO repeated similar comments to USA Today on March 24th. The Strategy Group received a signing fee from Safe America Media that was fully documented and disclosed to Congress, Yoho said in a statement. This information was swiftly communicated to address any inaccuracies in public reporting and ensure that the record accurately reflects the scope of our work. Blumenthal said in a March 23rd statement that the abuse of taxpayer funds is completely unacceptable. I will continue to demand the answers the American people deserve about how these funds were used and whether any federal officials profited from DHS contracts, according to Blumenthal.
Iran considers the U.S. ceasefire plan excessive. A 15-point proposal aired as both sides dig in. A joint article follows by Michael Loria, Bart Jansen, and Andrea Requier. Iran has rejected the U.S.'s ceasefire plan to end the war, calling the proposal excessive, according to Iranian state media, as thousands of U.S. Marines and paratroopers deployed to the Middle East. Iran considers the 15-point plan delivered through intermediaries unrealistic and vows to end the war on its own terms, according to Press TV, Iran's state-run English broadcasting service. This was on March 25. After Iran's rejection, Egypt's foreign minister called for continued negotiations and said Cairo is prepared to host them. The proposed plan contains several conditions under which Iran would end the war, including a complete halt of bombardments, reparations, and recognition of Tehran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, Press TV reported. 3 Israeli government sources said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet had been briefed on the proposal, which they said also included removing Iran's stocks of highly enriched uranium, halting enrichment, curbing its ballistic missile program, and ending funding for regional allies, Reuters reported. The development comes after President Trump delayed striking Iran's power plants, citing very good and productive conversations with Iranian leaders that could bring about a complete and total resolution of hostilities in the Middle East. Pakistan has offered to host talks attended by senior U.S. officials as soon as this week. A senior ruling party official in Turkey, Harun Armagan, told Reuters on March 25 that Ankara also was playing a role, passing messages between Iran and the U.S. There has been no public recognition from Iran that it is willing to negotiate at all, and its assertions that it would not do so have become increasingly caustic. Has the level of your inner struggle reached the stage of you negotiating with yourself? The top spokesperson for Iran's Joint Military Command, Abraham Zolfakari, taunted Trump in comments on Iranian state TV. There are no talks or negotiations between Iran and the United States, he said. No one can trust United States diplomacy. Our position is clear on what they have claimed. Right now, our brave military is focused on defending Iran's territory and sovereignty against this brutal and illegal war. Now, meanwhile, the Pentagon is planning to send thousands of airborne troops to the Persian Gulf to give Trump more options to order a ground assault, sources have told Reuters, according to adding two contingents of Marines already on their way. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard a huge amphibious assault ship could arrive about the end of this month. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:30. Continuing, Iran has maintained its stranglehold on oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, causing gas prices to spike and threatening the global economy. But oil prices in Wall Street opened higher on March 25 after the U.S. officials presented Iran with the peace plan. The average cost of a gallon of gas was $3.98 nationwide, according to Gas Buddy's tracker. Now, if oil's decline holds, gas will likely follow a day or two later. Brent crude, which is the global benchmark for oil prices, was down about 5%, close to $95 a barrel, in the 9 a.m. hour, Eastern Standard. The major stock indexes added about 1% each at the opening bell, and the 10-year U.S. Treasury note fell 6 basis points. The number of U.S. service members wounded in the war is now at 290, U.S. Central Command said early March 25. The vast majority of these injuries have been minor, and more than 255 troops have already returned to duty. Central Command spokesperson Captain Tim Hawkins said in her statement, "The number of wounded marks an increase of 90 service members since Hawkins' last update on March 16. About 1,500 civilians, including more than 200 children, have been killed in strikes on Iran. This according to the Human Rights Activist News Agency, a U.S.-based organization that focuses on conditions in Iran. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Lebanon, where Israel is moving to occupied territory."
Voice of America's Lake is facing lawsuit. Staff members accuse her of censorship. From Taylor Seeley of the Arizona Republic and the USA Today Network. Voice of America staffers accused Kari Lake and the U.S. Agency for Global Media of censorship and propaganda in a new lawsuit filed in federal district court in Washington, D.C. The employees said Lake and Michael Regas, the acting CEO of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, used VOA to control journalist reporting, suppressing material the Trump administration opposed, and passing off partisan messages as news. A Global Media Agency is an independent agency of the U.S. government that oversees Voice of America. That has led to censoring interviews, video footage, and stories about the Iran war and hijacking VOA's Mandarin service, which provides radio and broadcast programming in China, to republish verbatim White House talking points and label them falsely as news, the complaint says. Under Regas' leadership, journalists rarely leave the newsroom to report and instead publish stories that often appear to be rewritten press releases from the federal government, according to the complaint. They are turning VOA into a partisan mouthpiece of the administration, the lawsuit alleges, disseminating images of President Trump in the style of Dear Leader Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Voice of America is a U.S.-funded international news broadcast service, providing news in 50 languages to more than 354 million people. Its website states, the broadcaster produces digital television and radio content. The complaint alleges that stories that VOA would normally cover in detail, like the deadly bombing of a girls' school in Iran on February 28th of this year, are barely mentioned, and uncomfortable facts, like death tolls from U.S. strikes in Iran, are omitted from the coverage altogether. The Trump administration's control over VOA is anti-ethical to the tradition of press freedom that has marked America since its founding, according to the lawsuit. it violates the First Amendment of the Constitution, which protects speech from government infringement, as well as federal law that requires VOA to provide independent, accurate, and objective news coverage, the complainant states. Federal law erects a firewall between the VOA newsroom and its publishers and federal political appointees, which has been broken, the lawsuit says. The result has silenced journalists and editors and deprived listeners, viewers, and readers from around the world who rely on VOA of news. Alex Nichol, Director of Public Affairs for USAGM, said in response to the lawsuit, American taxpayers fund USAGM and Voice of America, and those funds by law must support broadcasting that reflects U.S. policy and the interests of the American people. USAGM is responsible for oversight of its networks, including Voice of America, and for ensuring compliance with the VOA's charter, which requires authoritative, accurate journalism that is reflective of and clearly presents U.S. policies. That charter says in part, VOA will represent America, not any single segment of American society, and will therefore present a balanced and comprehensive projection of significant American thought and institutions. It says also, VOA will present the policies of the United States clearly and effectively, and will also present responsible discussions and opinion on these policies. The March 23rd lawsuit comes after Lake and the USAGM suffered a separate court loss this month, when U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth found that Lake was unlawfully running the agency. Lamberth ordered more than 1,000 VOA journalists back to work, undoing Lake's prior decisions to abruptly place 1,042 out of 1,147 full-time employees on administrative leave, a day after Trump issued an executive order to reduce the federal workforce. The federal agency was initially given a March 23rd deadline to reactivate the employees, but successfully sought an extension. Lamberth ordered USAGM to file a progress update on April the 1st. Now, who is behind the VOA lawsuits against Lake? The latest lawsuit was brought by 4 VOA staffers who were placed on leave. PEN America, a writers group focused on free speech, and Reporters Without Borders, Inc., a nonprofit organization focused on preserving the right to freedom of information. The individuals and groups are seeking a jury trial and a permanent injunction banning Lake, Regus, and USAGM from infringing on the newsroom's editorial independence. The VOA staffers include Barry Newhouse, the acting director of the VOA Central News Division in Washington, D.C., from October of 2023 until December of last year. Ayesha Tanzim, director of VOA's South and Central Asia, which is a SCA division, placed on leave in March of 2025. Doug Hyuk Lee, who joined VOA in April of 2006 as chief of the Korean service. Knessia Turkova, who worked for VOA Russian service from 2017 to 2025 as a personal services contractor. Lake, a former Fox 10 Phoenix newscaster, took a role in the Trump administration after her losing bids for political office in Arizona in 2022 and 24. She has carried out Trump's plan to dismantle the agency in line with the Conservative Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 report. Why was Voice of America a target for cuts by the administration? VOA, Radio Free Europe, and related government-funded operations quickly became a target for elimination when Trump returned to the White House. Lake made Frank Wuko an advisor to her at USAGM. He is a conservative former talk show host who promoted the birther conspiracy involving former President Barack Obama and is credited for help on the Project 2025 report's chapter, critical of USAGM and its organizations, including VOA. In the section of the 920-page report dealing with USAGM, it said that the USAGM's firewall, preventing editorial oversight of its media organizations, has paved way for the media organizations to join the mainstream media's anti-U.S. chorus and denigrating the American story, all in the name of so-called journalistic independence. In a February 2026 social media post, USA GM said Voice of America is carrying President Trump's message about Operation Epic Fury across all language services. Lake, in a February interview with the Gateway Pundit, said, "What we're doing right now is we're getting the president's message out."
Back in the United States, Coyle is greeted by cheers after being released by the Taliban. Janine Santucci writes this very brief article. American Dennis Coyle is back on U.S. soil a day after being released by the Afghan Taliban following over a year of captivity. Coyle, a Colorado researcher who was detained in January of 2025 while he was in Afghanistan to study languages, was greeted by the cheers and embraces of loved ones, including his mother and sisters, at Joint Base San Antonio as the sun rose on March 25. The Taliban said it decided to release Coyle after a request by his mother and after its Supreme Court deemed the period of his detention sufficient. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, March 24, that Coyle's release was a positive step by the Taliban, but that it must end its practice of hostage diplomacy. The United States declared Afghanistan a state sponsor of wrongful detention earlier in March, urging the Taliban to release Coyle and other hostages. Now, Coyle's family thanked President Trump, Rubio, and other officials for securing his release. Today, our hearts are filled with overwhelming gratitude and praise to God for sustaining Dennis's life and bringing him back home after what has been the most challenging and uncertain 421 days of our lives. This from Coyle's family in a statement to the Pueblo chieftain, part of the USA Today network.
Moving on to the money section of USA Today, a survey. Workers unhappy with work. Americans say they are stuck in current jobs. From Jessica Guyon of USA Today. America is becoming a nation of pessimistic workers. For the first time in Gallup's tracking, more workers have a negative view of their prospects. Even as many measures show that the economy is relatively robust, more workers report struggling than thriving, according to a Gallup survey of U.S. workers conducted from October 31st to November 13th. That's a stunning reversal from 2022 and 23, when more than half of employees had a rosier outlook. For its Life Evaluation Index, Gallup asked people to picture a ladder with the lowest rung representing the worst possible life and the highest rung representing the best possible life. Those rungs are numbered 0 to 10. Gallup classified people who rate their current life a 7 or higher and their anticipated life in 5 years an 8 or higher as thriving, according to Jim Harder, Gallup's chief scientist for workplace management and well-being. Those who rate their current and anticipated life a 4 or lower are classified as suffering. Those who are neither suffering nor thriving are considered struggling, he said. What's behind the gloomy mindset? America's unemployment rate may be low, but so is job growth. And that sluggish pace of hiring, the slowest labor market in years, has left many workers feeling out of sorts. Dour sentiment has risen as job market confidence has sunk to near historic lows, with just 28% of workers saying now is a good time to find a good job, down from nearly 70% in mid-2022, Gallup found. The survey called the 42-point decline the largest collapse in job market confidence Gallup has recorded in the past 4 years. Restless workers can't find a comparable role with the same pay and benefits, making them feel stuck, Harder said. About 30% of all workers agreed or strongly agreed that they feel stuck in their current job. A larger share, 43%, reported they remain in their current job primarily because leaving would be too difficult or costly. People who have jobs are holding on to them even if they don't want them, while those who want jobs are having trouble finding work. Employees have less choice to get what they would define as quality jobs. Of those who are applying, very few are getting opportunities, Harder told USA Today. Those stark market conditions show few signs of easing. Social media is rife with frustrated job seekers submitting hundreds of applications with no callbacks, and overqualified candidates desperately throwing resumes at entry-level positions. The job market is really tough, one job seeker commented on LinkedIn. I've applied to so many jobs and nothing. I don't remember it being this hard to find a job. What makes this moment distinct is not just the scale of discontent, but the conditions that surround it, Gallup said.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:45.
Continuing, workers who want to leave largely cannot, constrained by economics, a cooling labor market, and the difficulty of finding anything comparable to what they have. Antsy job seekers have not been deterred. Turnover intent remains at its highest level since Gallup began tracking it in 2015. More than half of workers are actively hunting for a new job, and 40% are on the lookout for better opportunities, Gallup found. Fewer than half of the U.S. workforce said they were not looking at all. But with scarce opportunities, nearly half of active job seekers say it has been a negative experience. A little more than a quarter said they had a positive job search experience. More than half of job seekers who applied for at least one job in the past 30 days reported not landing a single interview. Which workers are the most pessimistic? Federal workers, in particular, are experiencing a reversal of fortune. In 2022, federal workers were significantly more likely than the average U.S. worker to be thriving, 4 points above state and local government workers, and 6 points above the average for the American workers, according to Gallup. By 2025, federal workers' thriving rate fell 12 points to an average of 48%, far outpacing the sharp declines in state and local government workers and the overall worker average. All major segments of the U.S. workforce experience a worsening outlook on their lives since 2022. However, federal government employees stand out for the severity and speed of their decline, according to Gallup. For the first time in the past 3 years, college-educated workers are the least optimistic about the job market, likely a reflection of slowed hiring in white-collar fields and layoffs in professional jobs, according to Gallup. That increased pessimism is a new phenomenon. Up until 2024, workers with undergraduate or more advanced college degrees had been slightly more optimistic about the job market, Gallup found. Just 19% of college-educated workers say now is a good time to find a good job, far less than the 35% of workers without a college degree. Younger workers today are also more pessimistic about the job market than older workers. Want happy workers? Show them the money. The top cited reason for job hunting was pay or benefits among the 69% of workers looking for something better and 53% of dissatisfied workers, Gallup found. More opportunities to grow and advance were the second most cited reason, while more than a quarter of respondents blamed their wandering eyes on leadership or management. Overall wage growth has been slowing for years, a knock-on effect from the tighter job market. The average employer planned to grant pay increases of 3.5% in this year, according to an October survey by human resources firm Mercer, a pay bump that barely keeps up with inflation. For years, job hoppers could finagle higher pay in new roles, but that strategy has been losing steam for a while. And with fewer job openings come fewer opportunities to switch jobs. Only 56% of workers negotiated higher pay in new roles, down from 70% in 2023, according to ZipRecruiter. What's more, a quarter of people who recently landed a new job took a pay cut, and an additional 16% got the same pay. For many who accepted lower pay, unemployment drove the decision.
More Americans relying on tax refund windfalls. Daniel DeVries of USA Today writes, nearly half of American taxpayers are counting on an IRS refund to help them pay the bills or get out of debt, according to a new survey. Now, this is a good year for refunds. The IRS has returned $161 billion to individual taxpayers through March 6th. That's 11% more than the agency refunded through the same week last year. The average refund is $3,676. That's also up from last year. So refunds are higher this year, taxes are lower, thanks to President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Now that's according to an analysis from the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. Many Americans will count their tax refund as the largest single check they deposit this year. People just don't get big checks in the mail that often, according to Matt Schultz, Chief Consumer Finance Analyst at LendingTree. And judging by March 16th LendingTree survey, many of us have already spent the money several times over in our heads. Or more than 1,500 tax filers surveyed, 46% said they are relying on getting a refund this year. In 3 prior surveys, smaller shares of taxpayers said the same thing. Refunds are coming at a precarious moment for American consumers. The stock market down, gas prices way up, job market seems to be tightening. It's just the reality of this year that a lot of people need a little bit of help to make ends meet, Schultz says. But some Americans may be overly optimistic about their chances of getting a refund. In the LendingTree survey conducted in early February, nearly 9 out of 10 filers said they expect to get one. The survey played out before most taxpayers had even filed their returns. In fact, fewer than two-thirds of taxpayers refunds, according to IRS data for last year. A few specific demographic groups seem to be banking on refunds more than others. That would be 63% of parents with children under age 18 are relying on a refund, compared with only 32% of parents with adult children. 58% of millennials are counting on a refund, only 45% Gen Xers. 48% of men are relying on a refund, compared with 44% women. Roughly 2 out of 3 taxpayers said a tax refund is important to their overall financial situation, according to the survey. 1 out of 3 said they depend on it. Now, rising prices have been a relentless theme for consumers over the past 5 years. No surprise, then, that many taxpayers plan to use any tax refund to pay everyday expenses. So, a top 10 list of how people are going to be spending those checks: pay for everyday expenses, 34%. Pay off debts, 34%. Put it in a savings account or an emergency fund, 32%. Save it for a big purchase, 19%. Buy something I've always wanted, 18%. Put it in a retirement savings, 15%. Help support family members, 13%. Take a vacation, 13%. Invest in stocks, 11%. Donate to charity, 8%. So, bottom line, where's my refund? If you're expecting one, you can track its progress at the Where's My Refund page on the IRS website. Your refund status should be available 24 hours after you filed a 2025 return electronically, according to the tax agency. If you file a paper return, you're going to have to wait 4 weeks. Your refund will take longer to arrive if you file a paper return. The typical wait, according to the IRS, is 3 weeks after you e-file, 6 weeks or more after the agency receives a return in the mail. Oh, one more tip. You'll get your refund a lot faster if you receive it by direct deposit. Mm-hmm. You know, my wife says that if we get a big refund, it's going to blow it all on shoes and lipstick.
Simon Property Group CEO, Shopping Mall King, dies at 64. From Alyssa Guffey of the Indiana Star and the USA Today Network. David Simon, the leader of Simon Property Group, the largest retail real estate company in the world, died March 22nd at the age of 64. Simon died following a 2024 cancer diagnosis. He remained at the helm of the company, which was founded by his father and uncle, as he received medical treatment. On March 23rd, the Simon Property Group Board of Directors appointed Eli Simon, David's eldest son, to be the next chief executive and president of the Indianapolis-based company, continuing the family's leadership of the company. Eli Simon will also continue to serve in his previous role, which is chief operating officer. In a statement, the Simon family said David poured his heart and soul into building Simon Property Group. To those in the industry, he was known as a hardworking executive who worked long hours even when sick and who was not afraid to get into spats with retail and industry leaders. David Simon joined Melvin Simon and Associates, the company's predecessor, as chief financial officer in 1990, after starting his career as a Wall Street investment banker. He stayed with Simon Property Group and was named CEO at 33 years old. In his 3 decades as chief executive, Simon transformed the company from a regional real estate business into the largest mall ownership group and the largest publicly owned retail real estate company in the world. He led the company through changing retail demands and pressures, including the 2008 recession and the 2020 global pandemic, the fall of department stores like Sears and Saks Fifth Avenue, and most recently, the impact of tariffs on retail businesses, all events that shaped how the industry moves forward. Simon grew to become known as the shopping mall king. Those in the industry both admired and feared his tactics. Simon acknowledged that he could become heated. It was not unheard of for him to get into yelling matches with other retail leaders, in between shaking hands for multi-million-dollar deals, according to Wall Street Journal reporting. I've been kind of, a domineering type CEO, he told the Journal in a rare 2025 interview. Obviously, right now, that's impossible for me to do. I still do it occasionally. As the company grew its global portfolio, Simon saw the value in luxury upgrading existing properties into premier and experiential shopping centers, the company said. At the time of his death, Simon Property Group controlled more than 250 properties, totaling more than 200 million square feet.
You've been listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for Thursday, March the 26th, 2026, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after the short break. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of USA Today. Your readers are
Ken Drost.
and Jim Duffy. And moving on to the sports page, the NBA will explore expansion into Seattle and Vegas. From Scooby Axon and Lorenzo Reyes of USA Today. Pro basketball is seemingly on its way back to Seattle. The NBA's ownership group has voted to explore adding 2 new franchises, with expansion team applicants exclusively for the Seattle and Las Vegas markets for the 2028-29 season. The league announced on March 25th. Today's vote reflects our board's interest in exploring potential expansion to Las Vegas and Seattle, 2 markets with a long history of support for NBA basketball. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said in a statement, "We look forward to taking this next step and engaging with interested parties." The NBA has also contracted PJT Partners, an investment bank, to consult on prospective ownership groups, infrastructure, and the overall health of the prospective markets. The next steps would be a bidding process for potential owners, and the price tag is expected to be steep, estimated at between $7 billion and $10 billion. The league's 30 governors would then vote, with 23 needed for approval. Seattle has been without a professional basketball team since 2008, when the Supersonics relocated to Oklahoma City, where they were renamed the Thunder. The Supersonics began play in 1967, winning 6 division titles, 3 conference championships, and the NBA title in 1979.
UConn still number 1 among the women. Megan Hall of USA Today writes, "The Sweet 16 is packed with women's March Madness contenders. But who can win it all? The stakes are bigger, the matchups more intense, as the NCAA tournament marches towards the Final Four in Phoenix. After 68 teams began the push for a national title, only 16 remain. Only 5 out of those 16 programs have ever won a ring. UConn, Texas, Notre Dame, North Carolina, South Carolina. Can a team win the title for the first time? Which one might add another title to its championship collection?" So here's a ranking of all the Sweet 16 teams in the women's NCAA tournament in the order of their chance to win it all in Phoenix. Number 1, the UConn Huskies. They are loaded with talent offensively, including stars Ozzie Fudd and Sarah Strong. They are also pests defensively. If UConn brings any version of its defense that won the championship last season and has been the best in the country all season long, it will repeat. Second, the UCLA Bruins. The Bruins pose myriad problems for opposing defenses, from Lauren Betts to Kiki Rice to Gianna Neepkins, and more. And it's truly pick your poison guarding UCLA's 6 potential WNBA draft picks. For UCLA, if there was ever a year to finally put it together and win the program's first championship, it's now. Next, Texas Longhorns. After falling 1 game short of the national championship last year, the Longhorns are determined to return to the Final Four and earn the program's first championship since 1986. Much will be made about the contributions of Madison Booker or even Jordan Lee, but Rory Harmon's energy and production on both sides of the floor are likely what determines how far Texas will go. Number 4, South Carolina Gamecocks. This year's South Carolina roster might not have as much experience as previous championship rosters, but it still has plenty of talent. Any roster with Raven Johnson, Joyce Edwards, Tania Lotson, and Tournament Tessa Johnson is not to be underestimated. At number 5, the LSU Tigers. At over 95 points a game, LSU's offense has no problem showing up. It's the Tigers' defensive efforts on the court and activity on the glass that are going to determine if they win a championship. No rebounds, no rings, Michaela Williams said. Number 6, Duke Blue Devils. Now, they average nearly 15 turnovers a game, but if it wants a chance at a national championship, that's got to change now. If the Blue Devils could average 10 turnovers or fewer, a title is within reach. Number 7, Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, they're one of the most dangerous teams in the tournament, with the country's leading scorer, Michaela Blakes, at 27.1 points a game at their helm. Still, Blakes is only the beginning of the problems for opposing teams. There are still players like freshman sensation Aubrey Galvin and Justin Piso to worry about. Number 8, the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, Tony Morgan and Tiani Key are a dangerous duo that gives opposing defenses nightmares. However, combined with Clara Strack, who is a walking double-double, 16.9 points and 10.1 rebounds per game, the Wildcats are a dangerous sleeper to potentially win a ring. At number 9, Michigan Wolverines. Now, their trio of stars, Silas Swords, Olivia Olson, and Mila Holloway, has done a lot of heavy lifting to get the team to this point. The question now becomes who will be the X factor off the bench the deeper the Wolverines go into the tournament. Oklahoma Sooners. The Sooners are very young, only 3 upperclassmen on the roster. For Oklahoma to win a championship, it would have to be through the leadership of Reagan Beers, who averages nearly 16 points a game and 10.5 rebounds. Number 11, the TCU Horned Frogs. Now, TCU has never been to a Final Four in program history. To get there, the Frogs can't get bored with being boring, Donovan Hunter said. They have to focus on simple plays and not try to play outside of what got them this far. Number 12, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, Notre Dame is playing its best basketball right now, winning 9 of its last 10. With Hannah Hidalgo leading the Fighting Irish, never count them out. Hidalgo is a one-person wrecking crew whose per-game average is 25.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and 5.5 steals. At number 13, the Louisville Cardinals. Now, the path for them to win a title starts with their bench. Imari Berry, second on the team in scoring at 11.2 points a game, has got to lead a unit that needs multiple breakout games in the tournament. After Berry, who's going to step up? At number 14, the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, they're tended to fall behind in the third quarter at times during the regular season, making finishing games that much tougher. That habit has extended into the postseason. The Tar Heels have to ask themselves how long they're willing to let it go on with a championship on the line. At number 15, Minnesota Golden Gophers. Now, they're seeking its first Final Four appearance since 2005 and first national championship. To win, the Golden Gophers have to depend on their scrappy defense, which only allows 57.9 points per game. And finally, in last place, the Virginia Cavaliers. As the number 10 seed, the Virginia Cavaliers have their work cut out for them. A team ranked 10 or lower has never won a championship. However, with standout guard Kimora Johnson leading the charge, anything feels possible.
And now for the men. In separating the contenders from the pretenders, a vote for the Arizona men. From Craig Meyer of USA Today. Over 4 action-packed days, a 64-team bracket was quartered. And with it, we've got 16 college men's basketball teams whose dreams of a national championship get to live for at least a few more days. With the Final Four and national championship pictures now much clearer than they were a week ago, how do the remaining teams stack up? Here's a ranking of the Sweet 16 teams. Number 16, Texas. The Longhorns fit the traditional mold of an underachieving power conference team that gets some favorable matchups and starts to play up to its potential in the single elimination crucible of the tournament. Their 3 wins in 5 days against NC State, BYU, and Gonzaga may not be the end for them either. Dalen Swain is one of the best bucket getters remaining in the field, and 7-footer Matas Vokiatatis is averaging 18.3 points and 11 rebounds per game in the tournament. Despite his placement on the list, this is the kind of team that could absolutely give Purdue problems. Number 15, Iowa. Ben McCollum wins wherever he goes, whether it's the 4 national championships at Division II Northwest Mississippi State or 31 wins and a second-round trip in his lone season at Drake. Now, in his first season at Iowa, the Hawkeyes are off to their first Sweet 16 since 1999, after a 73-72 upset of Florida on March 22nd. The win came despite star guard Bennett Stiers missing all 9 of his 3-point attempts, but Iowa got it done closer to the basket, making 19 of its 27 two-pointers against one of the country's tallest teams. Their next foe is a familiar one, a Nebraska team that it went 1-1 against during the regular season. Number 14, Tennessee. While the performance of Rick Barnes' teams in the tournament makes for an easy punchline, the Volunteers' losses in the Elite Eight each of the last 2 seasons came against the eventual national runner-up. With a win over number 3 seed Virginia on March 22nd, they've overperformed their seed. And because of it, Tennessee's now off to the Sweet 16 for the 4th consecutive season, the first time in program history that's ever happened. Number 13, Nebraska. The Cornhuskers shed the historical ignominy of being the only power conference program without an NCAA tournament win by blowing out Troy in a 4-versus-13 matchup before doubling that all-time tournament victories count 2 days later, after surviving Vanderbilt and Tyler Tanner's nearly miraculous in-and-out heave. Now, instead of having to face number 1 seed and reigning national champion Florida, Fred Hoiberg's team gets a more manageable Sweet 16 matchup in number 9 seed Iowa in a game that won't lack any intensity. Number 12, St. John's. The Red Storm gave away a 13-point lead with 7 minutes remaining, only to get it back thanks to Dylan Darling's buzzer-beating heroics. The Johnnies have some of the same offensive concerns that led to a surprisingly early ouster from last year's tournament, namely a lack of consistent outside shooting. But they're one of the most tenacious and reliable teams defensively in the country, and maybe more important, have one of the greatest coaches in the sport's history leading the way. If there's a number to make St. John fans optimistic heading into its game against Duke, it's this. Rick Pitino is 12-1 in his career in the Sweet 16. Number 11, Alabama. Aiden Holloway's arrest cast significant doubt over the Crimson Tide entering the tournament, but Nate Oates' teams wiped a bunch of that away with wins over Hofstra and Texas Tech by a combined 45 points. Alabama looked as offensively potent as ever in those victories, scoring 90 points in each game. Though Latrell Wrightsell did an excellent job helping make up for Holloway's absence, the Tide will probably need their embattled number 2 scorer available to knock off number 1 seed Michigan in the Sweet 16. Number 10, Arkansas. The Razorbacks had to sweat it out a bit in the second round, but as High Point showed against Wisconsin, a victory against the Panthers, even as a power conference program, cannot be taken for granted. The biggest reason for optimism for a deep Arkansas run was on full display in the first 2 games, with freshman superstar Darius Acuff scoring 60 combined points in first and second round wins. Number 9, Michigan State. It's a familiar story for a Tom Izzo coached team, with defense and rebounding helping push the Spartans into the Sweet 16 for the 17th time since 1998. Michigan State smoked North Dakota State by 25 points and pulled away from an 8-point win against a short-handed Louisville team in the second round. Jeremy Fears Jr. looked every bit like the All-American he is in those victories, dishing out a combined 27 assists, including 16 against the Cardinals, to break a program NCAA tournament single game record previously held by Magic Johnson. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:15. And continuing at number 8, UConn. Perhaps no player in the event had a more impressive opening week of the tournament than Terrace Reed Jr., who had 41 points and pulled down 40 rebounds in wins against Furman and UCLA. He's the first player to go off for at least 40 points and 40 rebounds in the first week of the tournament since Tim Duncan, all the way back in 1997. We all know Dan Hurley's program can get it done this time of year. Even with the team, the predictive metrics haven't been quite as high on this season, at least compared to their fellow 2 top seeds. Number 7, Purdue. The Boilermakers have been absolutely lethal in the second half of the game so far in the tournament, outscoring number 15 seed Queens 59-38 and number 7 seed Miami 41-29 in the final 20 minutes of those matchups. While NCAA Division I career SS leader Braden Smith deservedly gets his fair share of attention, Trey Kaufman-Renn has been Matt Painter's best player so far this tournament, with 44 combined points in his team's opening 2 wins. Number 5, Iowa State. Things could get very well gotten dicey for the Cyclones, with All-American forward Joshua Jefferson out with a sprained ankle for a second-round game against Kentucky. Instead, Iowa State bombarded the Wildcats' high-priced roster, overcoming an early 18-6 deficit to outscore them 76-45 the rest of the way in an 82-63 blowout. Number 5, Illinois. The Fighting Illini didn't just beat their opening 2 opponents, but snatched their souls. After a 35-point drubbing of Penn, Illinois turned around and won by 21 against a VCU team that had won 17 of its previous 18 games, including an overtime victory 2 days earlier against North Carolina. Number 4, Duke. Of all the remaining number 1 seeds, the Blue Devils looked the shakiest in the tournament's first week. They trailed number 16 Siena by 13 early in the second half before gutting out a 71-65 win, and were tied with number 9 seed TCU with 14 minutes remaining before pulling away for a 23-point victory in the second round. Number 3, Houston. The Cougars advanced to the Sweet 16 even more effortlessly than any of the number 1 seeds, beating Idaho and Texas A&M by 31 points apiece, while limiting those teams to 104 combined points. Number 2, Michigan. The Wolverines' typically stout defense looked surprisingly porous in the first round, giving up 80 points to number 16 seed Howard, but they fared much better 48 hours later in a 23-point romp over a dynamic St. Louis team in which college basketball cult hero Robbie Avila was effectively neutralized. And number 1, Arizona. The Wildcats were one of the most dominant teams during the regular season and showed few, if any, signs of slowing down in their first 2 tournament games. They ensured LIU never got the chance to get their fins up in a 34-point beatdown in the first round before pulling away to win by 12 against a Utah State team that was woefully underseeded as a number 9 seed.
On the golf, Lee slows 26 swing to go longer. Cameron Jordan of Golf Week magazine writes, Min Woo Lee believed that he was good enough to be on the PGA Tour. It's the place he had worked his entire life to get to. When he arrived, it was the realization of his dreams. But being on a PGA Tour and being able to contend on the PGA Tour are 2 different things, and Lee learned that the hard way last year. Now, he's the defending champion at this week's Texas Children's Houston Open, where he held off Scottie Scheffler and Gary Woodland to win by a shot last year. It was a week that marked his arrival on the tour, a win that proved he was ready for the brightest of lights. Or so he thought. I thought that I was good enough to be out here and play, but the signature events beat me up last year, Lee said. He said this on March 24th in a pre-tournament news conference at Memorial Park. I needed to get a lot better and a lot more stable, a lot stronger too. Now, Lee's win was one that elevated his own expectations, but he struggled in the PGA Tour's biggest events. Come the fall, He had a meeting with his team and diagnosed where he needed to make changes in his game. His biggest strength, the driver, was also penalizing him. He needed to rein it in while still being dominant off the tee, and to begin this year, he has done just that. Now, he's made all 6 cuts this year, including a runner-up finish at Pebble Beach and a T6 at Bay Hill, both signature events. His clubhead speed with driver is about 1 mile per hour less this year than it was last year, but he has actually increased his average driving distance by nearly 2 yards. His swing is more controlled and powerful, and the results showing in some of the best golf of Lee's career. Now, it was at a point where I would rather play not the signature events and play well on courses that weren't maybe as tough, Lee said. You play Bay Hill, you play any of the signature events. The rough was 3-4 inches long. If you just missed the fairway by a yard, you're hacking it out, which I thought was pretty tough. Lee admitted he slowed down his swing ever so slightly to be more in control of the golf ball off the tee. Last year, he ranked 105th in strokes gained off the tee. So far this year, he's number 7. For me, I felt like I went backwards, which wasn't, I guess, the right way, Lee said. These young kids are hitting it long, pretty straight. You just got to hit it straight at signature events. I mean, rough. We thought that it was. Yeah, I guess everyone says the scores are too low. So then we have to make the rough really thick. But that gets away of a skill which kind of hurts me, which did hurt me. Like I said, it was a blessing, playing well now and a lot more accurate, which is great. Last year at Memorial Park, Lee was dominant with his driver and rode a hot putter to his first PGA Tour victory. He hasn't been able to hoist a trophy again, but this week he's back at the place where he gets to defend for the first time. And hitting his driver better than ever, he has a great chance to go back-to-back. One of the best feelings in the world, work hard, and then hold that trophy towards the end of the week, Lee said. Hopefully, I can do that this week and defend. But very excited for this week. Playing very good golf. It's going to be a warm one, but I'm ready for it.
In another article related to golf, the LPGA field in Phoenix features both Korda sisters from Beth Ann Nichols of Golf Week and the USA Today Network. These days, Jessica Korda practices about 3 days a week. Mondays, she usually gets in a 90-minute session. Some days, it's as little as 45. She has a sitter for 5 to 6 hours, so she decides what's the most important task of the day and goes from there. I definitely prioritize my time with my son over golf, so it's not nearly as exciting as it used to be practicing, said the eldest Korda. On March the 24th, at the Ford Championship at Whirlwind Golf Club in Phoenix, Nellie Korda and Jessica Korda compared their matching Navy shirts on the dais. This week marks the first time in nearly 3 years that the sisters are competing in the same official LPGA event. They played last December in the Grant Thornton Invitational, an unofficial mixed team event co-sanctioned by the PGA Tour. They also teamed up at the Seminole Pro member this month. Jessica, who turned 33 on February 27th, is a 6-time winner on the LPGA. She was on medical leave for a back injury before she got pregnant with her first child, Grayson, and last played in an official tour event in May of 2023 when she withdrew after the first round of the Founders Cup. I didn't think I would tee it up again after I was withdrawing out of a couple events in 2023. So being here, feeling good, we'll see where it takes us, Jessica said. 3 years is a very long time. Younger sister Nellie won the first event of the season and then took the next weeks off from the tour, returning last week at the Fortinet Founders Cup, where she lost by 1 to Hyo-Joo Kim. The Korda family is staying together in a house this week. Nellie cooked the night of March 23rd, and their mother, Regina, has confiscated the baby monitor. At Grant Thornton, after the first day, Grayson decided to not sleep, said Jessica. So I didn't sleep from midnight to 5 a.m. It adds another variable to golf, to preparation. Staying mentally sharp is another adjustment for Jessica, who plays most of her golf in a cart back home in South Florida. Sometimes she doesn't get in the full 18, rushing home to relieve the babysitter. The back pain still comes, but she's able to manage it. She's been working with swing instructor Jason Bale on the fundamentals, struggling through a grip change. I played injured for so long that I created some bad habits, so it was just going backwards to watching Nellie's hips rotate so nicely. And that's exactly what I strive to do, Jessica said, but it's a very slow process. Nellie lights up next to her sister. It was an adjustment for her, taking on the tour without a built-in best friend. They're having a blast together in Arizona. It's like old times, only different. Grayson is at such a fun age where there is always something to do, and he's just so much fun and laughing all the time, said Nellie. It's been a lot of fun. The first time the sisters played together on the big stage was the 2013 U.S. Women's Open, where the USGA paired them together at Sabanek. That doesn't happen all that often on the LPGA, with the quarters often appearing in different waves. They've teed it up in the same LPGA-sanctioned event 96 times. Nellie, who is 27, has 16 LPGA wins, 2 major titles, and an Olympic gold medal. She had the advantage of learning from her sister. I think Jess taught me what life on tour was kind of like, said Nellie. Not many people really talk about it, but sometimes it is like a super isolating, lonely life out here, especially if you're not really a very outgoing person to develop friendships with other girls, because it is highly competitive as well. So knowing what the tour life was like, traveling and getting the insight from her, she turned pro in 2011. I feel like for me, it's really helped my rookie year of having a built-in best buddy.
In Major League Baseball, 2026 bold projections. First thing, the extremes aren't so very extreme in Major League Baseball this year. The article written by Gabe LeKay, by the way. These are not the dark days of the 2010s when teams were blatantly trying to lose or making for some easy 100 loss seasons, and an equal amount of moderately decent teams stacking wins like folded laundry. In 2026, there's probably no more than 5 teams that can be confidently counted out of postseason contention. And that makes the annual exercise of bold predictions a little bit trickier. Yet, even if there's legitimate hopes in almost every precinct, we can still take some stabs at eye-opening feats and surprise outcomes. With that, a venture out onto the limb for 2026. The Mets, not the Dodgers, are the real super team. Now, owner Steve Cohen, who still spends like nobody else in ownership, has gotten a free ride out of this whole Dodgers ruining baseball narrative. Credit to his players, we suppose, for not winning the last 2 World Series. Yet, after a highly disappointing 83 win, no playoff season, the Mets are stacked, hungry, and primed for a huge season. Now, maybe it's just a 2026 only alignment, but there is no more dynamic 1-2-3 in the game than Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Bo Bichette. Freddie Peralta gives them a real number 1 in the rotation. Now, Clay Holmes is fully stretched out. Rookie Nolan McLean and later Jonah Tong gives them high-end arms to miss plenty of bats. The bullpen it's different anyway, which is not a bad thing. Can they dislodge Philadelphia atop the National League East? It'll be a great race, but more quietly than usual. We feel something special coming from Queens.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:30.
The Pirates are going to make the playoffs. So throwing this out there while it remains a bold stance to take. We're not patting ownership on the head for actually bringing in reinforcements, but we'll begrudgingly allow that they've at least given the Buccos a chance. An always fallow lineup finally has definition. And while we're concerned that they got too excited about trading away pitching, the Paul Skeens-led group, which should get Jared Jones back too, is deep enough to contend. We'll take the trades of Johan Oviedo and Mike Burrows as a rousing endorsement of top prospect Bubba Chandler. And we're going to wait like everybody else for the arrival of Connor Griffin, franchise shortstop. Nothing's automatic about all this, but for once, the ingredients are there. Now, ABS will be kind of a bummer. This is ostensibly the year all the screenshot warriors have waited for. The automatic ball strike system, or colloquially robot umps, at least partially integrated into the game. Hey, the system works great. Challenges have to come in a timely fashion, and the robot cooks up a verdict far quicker than a judge in traffic court. Yet, in a mild bit of be careful what you wish for, the notion of fighting over 0.1 of an inch is going to seem silly, especially when a pitcher like Skeens paints a perfect pitch on the corner to ring up a batter, only for the prince of pedantry, ABS, to say, nah, you're not good enough. Next, J.J. Weatherholt is the NL's Rookie of the Year. Now, players are not concocted in a lab, but if you put together a perfect package for the modern game without simply saying, give me Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani, Weatherholt might be your guy. Now, he's speedy. He puts the ball in play. He has a power that will only continue to develop, is a natural shortstop, but can play all over the field. Now, in this case, he'll be at second base because there's a Gold Glover, Mason Wynn, at short. They should make beautiful music together in the middle. And while the St. Louis Cards rebuild may get unsightly at times, Weatherholt, the 7th overall pick out of West Virginia in 2024, will be appointment viewing. Next, Tarik Skubal tosses a perfect game. Now the stars are going to align someday. Tarik Skubal's combination of dominance and efficiency and his frequent dates against American League Central lineups is going to result in the ultimate pitching accomplishment, 27 up, 27 down. The lefty, many expect, will get close to $500 million this offseason, can get deeper in games quicker than most, thanks in part to a fastball changeup combo that can bury hitters in an 0-2 hole before their walk-up music has faded. And consider some of his gems last year. 9 innings, 2 hits, no walks, 13 strikeouts, 94 pitches against Cleveland. 7 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 90 pitches against the Chicago White Sox. 7 innings, 3 hits, no walks, 10 strikeouts, 93 pitches against Cleveland. 7 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts, 93 pitches against Minnesota. Now, at some point, every liner will find a glove. Every blooper will hang up long enough for an outfielder to run underneath it. And while it won't make Armando Galarraga whole, the Tigers will have instant replay this time as a backstop against injustice. And final prediction, Jason Benetti's star continues to rise. For now, from a national perspective, he's something of a guy you're familiar with, yet don't totally know. Now, as the man behind the mic for a rebooted Sunday Night Baseball on NBC and its streaming arm, Benetti has a platform to become the entertaining and familiar voice viewers want from their big-time broadcasts. The Detroit Tigers play-by-play man has done plenty of baseball and college hoops for Fox, Yet this is his first foray as a true number one guy. The booth format on NBC, which is going to integrate analysts from the participating clubs, is going to keep the product fresh every week, while allowing Benetti to tee up with the visiting talent, like he does with, Bill Rafferty on a Big Ten hoops game. In an increasing complex viewing world, especially within baseball, Sunday nights are once again going to be a safe harbor for fans seeking the familiar.
Time to recognize Painter as a big legend. From Zach Osterman of the Indianapolis Star and the USA Today Network. Matt Painter did exactly what you'd expect Matt Painter to do. When asked about becoming the fourth coach in Big Ten history to reach 500 career wins with his school, he talked about his players. The one thing that gets lost at Purdue, because we don't sign McDonald's All-Americans, is that our players are really good, he said on March the 22nd. These guys have put in, I know coaches talk about it, but they've put in so much in all areas to be the best that they can be. And that's how you end up getting a lot of victories, because you have really good players that are committed. It was typical for Painter, whose thoughtful humility has underpinned so much of his success at Purdue. He's become one of the most respected voices of his sport, commanding that respect with both his results and his measured, considered positions on the game to which he's devoted his life. But whatever merits of those talented and accomplished players, and there are, of course, many, they all share one through line whose excellence speaks for itself, no matter how much he might try to deflect it. As he joins Tom Izzo, Bob Knight, and Gene Keady in that exclusive foursome, it's time to acknowledge Matt Painter is a modern-day Big Ten legend. Painter can parry all he wants. His work speaks for itself. In addition to being just one of four coaches with 500 wins leading a Big Ten program, he's also one of six with double-digit NCAA tournament appearances. His 17 match Keady, his mentor and former coach. Painter is fifth behind Knight, Izzo, Bo Ryan, and Thad Matta in career winning percentage among coaches with at least 10 post-war seasons in the conference. He will almost certainly pass Keady in wins and probably tournament appearances next season, and he's on pace to pass Knight in about 7 years, possibly 6. He's right about his players. Braden Smith's seizure of the all-time NCAA assist record last weekend is just the latest accomplishment for a Painter-coached Boilermaker. 2 of the top 4 scorers in the program history played for Painter, including all-time leading scorer Zach Edey. In total, he counts 5 former players in the program's top 11. 3 of Purdue's top 5 and 6 of its top 10 all-time leading rebounders played on Painter teams. The Boilermakers' all-time assist leader pays for Painter right now, as former Charges have a monopoly on all sorts of single-season and career marks scattered throughout Purdue's record book. When you go through and you recruit, you're not drafting people. They've got to say yes, too, Painter said. Learning how to pivot when you don't, get maybe your top guy or the guy that you think, and then just keep working toward getting the guys that have that high competitive spirit, that are about winning, that have a high skill level. It's their passion. Here, attempting to praise his players, Painter, in a roundabout way, did the same for himself, because great players don't get there without great coaches. And if you line those players up probably to a man, they tell you Painter is the central reason for their success. Excuse me. Critics will point to a lack of a national championship, dismissing for a moment that Painter has plenty of time to win his. That one line item alone does not make or break a resume. No one would reasonably argue Kevin Ollie has a better resume than Ryan, Matta, Keady, or a host of others, simply because of a ring. Painter is also plenty accomplished in the postseason. 5 times named Big Ten Coach of the Year. He's won the conference tournament 3 times, including this month. He's reached the second weekend of the Big Dance 9 times. This year marks his second run of 3 consecutive Sweet 16 appearances, something Keady and Knight each only have managed once. All of which also misses the fundamental point of this exercise. We're not here to argue where Painter fits in the pantheon of Big Ten coaches. Time and score will sort that for us. This is simply to say something that might be obvious to some, might be obvious to many, but still should be said out loud. Painter has entered that elite class. He is one of the true greats of a conference, hardly short of them. Maybe none of this needed written. Maybe you, the reader, already recognized Painter fit here. But so much of our modern discourse has become an exercise in propping up by tearing down, picking out the GOAT, an acronym my 8-year-old son claims he invented, by way of pushing aside everyone else. We don't appreciate greatness enough in its time. We don't fate it properly until it has passed us by. Greatness delivers annually in West Lafayette, Indiana. Right now and year on year, Matt Painter is one of the truly great Big Ten men's basketball coaches of all time. If he won't say it, we'll do it for him.
Moving into the life section, a health and wellness essay. Pete's essay revealing her cancer is a way to cope. Erin Jensen of USA Today produces this really short, fine article. Amanda Peet, that's spelled P-E-E-T, is giving insight into what inspired her revelatory essay for The New Yorker. In this piece, published on March 21st, the 54-year-old actress chronicles her previously undisclosed breast cancer diagnosis, which coincided with both of her parents dying in hospice care. The truth is, I really didn't have an agenda that I can point to, Pete tells USA Today in an interview before the return of Apple TV's Your Friends and Neighbors this April 3rd. I don't really know exactly why I started writing. I tried to write over the last 15 years or so, but I'm sure it was some kind of way to cope a little bit and try to make sense of something that I couldn't make sense of. Pete explains in the essay that on August 29th of last year, she went in for a routine scan, as she has every 6 months, to monitor her dense and busy breasts. At the appointment, her physician discovered a small tumor on an ultrasound. Now, Pete's father, Charles D. Peet Jr., died just days later in his New York home. Meanwhile, Pete's mother, Penny Nee Levy, who lived with Pete on the West Coast, was in the final stages of Parkinson's disease, Pete writes. A subsequent MRI showed Pete had a second tumor, later determined to be benign. Caregivers addressed Pete's stage 1 breast cancer with a lumpectomy and radiation, she writes. She also mentions having a clear scan since Pete's mom died in January. Pete's Your Friends and Neighbors co-star Olivia Munn went public with her own breast cancer diagnosis in 2024. I hope by sharing this, it will help others find comfort, inspiration, support in their own journey. Munn, who's now 45, wrote on Instagram. She revealed she had been diagnosed in 2023, thanks to her doctor calculating her breast cancer risk assessment score, which looks at factors including age, family breast cancer history, and having her first child after the age of 30. She discovered my lifetime risk was 37%, Munn wrote in her post. An MRI and ultrasound later found Munn's cancer, and she had a double mastectomy. I was really moved by Pete coming out and talking about it, Munn tells USA Today. I just think that the more women who share this story, it always helps other women. Munn says Pete confided in her about her diagnosis last year. We were talking about the size of the tumor, Munn says, and I was like, gosh, your doctors were so great because they found it so early in this development. And to catch it at that place is rare because so many women find it when it's at a different stage. Mine was all over both of my breasts, and she's just incredibly lucky. For her to talk about that, It really spotlights to other women that early detection is going to save your life. And asking your doctor, making that a priority.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:45. Bleak ending of Blinders isn't the end, from Brian Alexander of USA Today. Now, here's a spoiler alert for this article. We're discussing the ending of Bleaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, streaming now on Netflix. Beware if you haven't seen it yet. For 6 TV seasons of Peaky Blinders, Tommy Shelby, played by Cillian Murphy, wielded a superpower. The World War I veteran's complete lack of fear of dying. Icy-eyed Tommy carried that weapon to the top of the gangster heap with his Birmingham, England-based Peaky Blinders. Despite deadly rivals and a deep-seated death wish, it wasn't a surprise when Tommy survived the BBC Netflix series that ended in 2022. Tommy couldn't die with the long-promised movie Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man in the pipeline, produced and written by series creator Stephen Knight. All through the series, in the words of John Keats, Tommy has been half in love with easeful death, Knight tells USA Today. If you don't care if you live or die, it almost makes you invulnerable. Well, invulnerable until you're finally fatally shot, which is the fate Tommy accepts, even brings on at the end of Immortal Man. The conclusion of the Peaky Blinders series looked up for Tommy, who faked his death and funeral pyre before riding away from his gangster life on a white horse. In Immortal Man, he's haunted by his past life, and the death surrounded and clearly is ready to check out. A pre-World War I affair with Zelda, a Romani woman, produces a son, Duke, who appears in season 6, setting events in motion. Kaulo, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who can commune with her deceased twin sister Zelda, convinces grown Duke Shelby, played by Barry Keoghan, that it's his moment to be king of the criminal empire. To do that, he needs to fire a bullet with Tommy written on into his death-longing dad. It's for his own good. I promised him he would find peace, Koalo says. But first, the father and illegitimate son come together to thwart the Nazi plot to circulate millions of pounds of counterfeit British currency in the economy, a scheme fancifully based on the real-life Operation Bernhard. Former foe Hayden Stagg, played by Stephen Graham, even joins the Peaky Blinders to shoot up the Nazis. Tommy plans to warehouse bomb that blows up the fake British currency. But he is shot twice in the final shootout against the regional Nazi liaison, British fascist John Beckett, played by Tim Roth. Tommy hits Beckett, who is driving at him while returning fire. The Peaky Blinders leader is ready to die, arms outstretched like Jesus, as Beckett's car speeds toward him. But Duke pulls his father out of the way. Tommy insists Duke finish him off with the bullet as he would a lame horse. He gives one more bit of advice, croaking, "Heavy lies the crown." Pain, Duke reluctantly uses the bullet with Tommy scrawled on it. Tommy chooses his son to do it. It's all part of a succession, right down to the bullet with the name on it, Knight says. And what are Tommy's last words? Tommy sees his life and many haunting traumas pass before his eyes and whispers his last words in the bleak midwinter. This phrase is from the 1872 poem In the Bleak Midwinter by English poet Christina Rossetti. The poem was set to music and became a beloved song among British World War I troops and Tommy's regiment. The line often is quoted in Peaky Blinders when major characters are near death. It gives comfort by reminding loved ones they've been living on borrowed time and should have died years ago, such as in a frozen battlefield trench. How was Tommy put to rest? There is no fake funeral pyre. Tommy is laid to rest in his gypsy wagon in the Peaky Blinders tradition, but on top of piles of Nazi faked counterfeit British bills. It's a fitting end to the Nazi scheme and a strong symbol of Tommy's life. For so long, for Tommy, everything has been about money, Knight says, and now he's lying on a pile of money that's going to get burned. that's worthless in every way. In a Beyond the Grave voiceover, Tommy says, "Once I nearly got expletive everything, but nearly doesn't count." He gives thanks for being reunited with his family, in whichever place that will have us. So shall be. Duke drops the lighter on the wagon. As the flames spread, Tommy is indeed relieved. "I'm free," he says. The memoir Tommy has been writing as a recluse is titled The Immortal Man, which is given to Duke as a life warning. Don't be like Dad. What is Tommy's last will? Tommy reads his will from beyond the grave. "Give my car to Johnny Dogs, my wine to Garrison Pub, my horses to someone who has no work for them, my bullets to someone who has no names to write on them, and my guns to someone who has no use for them." And finally, will Peaky Blinders be back? Knight already is working on the next TV generation of Peaky Blinders, which will be set in the 1950s. All signs point to Duke taking over the family business and becoming the next king. Knight refuses to say. "We're doing a new series," Knight says. "I can't talk about it, but the Peaky Blinders story will continue."
Sneaking back to the front page of USA Today, the High Court deals a blow to the music industry. Internet providers are not liable for user piracy. Maureen Grope of USA Today writes, "The Supreme Court, March 25, ruled against the music industry's effort to punish internet service providers that allow users to illegally copy and share content. The justices said a lower court erred when it found Cox Communications liable for steep damages after it continued to provide internet services to customers who had been flagged repeatedly for piracy. Cox did not tailor its service to make copyright infringement easier. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in the unanimous decision, Cox simply provided internet access, which is used for many purposes other than copyright infringement. Cox argued the standard used by the lower court would leave providers no choice but to cut off internet access to large account holders such as universities, hospitals, and even entire towns to avoid massive judgments. But Sony Music Entertainment and a host of other leading recording companies and music publishers said Cox helped 60,000 customers distribute more than 10,000 copyrighted works for free, contributing to a problem that robs the industry of billions of dollars every year. Cox, one of the nation's largest internet service providers, asked the Supreme Court to intervene after a jury in Virginia decided that a company owed $1 billion in damages to the music industry. An appeals court threw out the damages and ordered a new trial based on reduced violations. Cox continued to fight the remaining violations, arguing that to be liable, it had to actively assist piracy, not just fail to prevent it. The company had the backing of the Justice Department, tech companies such as X and Google, and the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU said a liability standard that incentivizes internet service providers to shut off internet access first and ask questions later would threaten free speech in an increasingly digital world and could have consequences for other distributors of speech, such as bookstores and social media sites. Trade associations for the music industry said they have tried various means to encourage internet service providers to help stop widespread copyright infringement that is threatening the viability of the industry. When an anti-piracy company hired by the Recording Industry of America discovers an internet user downloading or distributing copyrighted music, it flags that information and the user's internet protocol address for the service provider. But Cox argued that being penalized for continuing someone's internet service after receiving automated notices accusing an unknown user at a home or business of illegally copying or sharing music defies common law and common sense. To avoid being sued, a lawyer for the company told the justices during the December oral arguments Cox would have to terminate service for anybody using the same connection after an IP address is flagged. Paul Clement, the lawyer representing the music industry, countered, Cox is manufacturing a worst-case scenario after failing to take reasonable steps to respond to repeat offenders of peer-to-peer file sharing, the most common means of pirating music. Clement highlighted an email from a Cox manager overseeing compliance with Digital Millennium Copyright Act who told his colleagues, F the DCMA. The company failed to consider cutting off service to a customer until it had received 13 infringement notices, according to court records. Absent the ability to hold Cox responsible for such conduct, Clement said, music companies cannot fight piracy on a mass scale, and trying to go after individual violators directly is a teaspoon solution to an ocean problem. The case is Cox Communication versus Sony Music Entertainment.
You've been listening to a reading of USA Today for Thursday, March 26th, 2026. We read USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call 821-5555 and ask for Nick. Your readers today have been
Ken Drost
and Jim Duffy.
and Nick.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 9 of Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. Following that at 3 o'clock is the New Yorker, and at 4 o'clock, a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability